Welcome back, everyone. I hope you got a cup of tea and a bit of a walk around. We're joined now by some members from the DANÚ group. So we've David Wallis and Nigel Gillis who are going to speak to us now. And I've been out on some of the DANÚ farms and there's great work going on. So David will let you tell us all about it now.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to say first a big thanks to NOTS for asking us here again. And it's interesting that Norman is a member of DANÚ, I'm a member of DANÚ, and Nigel, and we're also members of BASE. And what we're going to see and what I'm presenting here is more an overview of what we're doing, is how much overlap and repetition is going on in the farms, and that I hope would help to validate a lot of what we're actually doing and trying to bring about some changes. I'm not going to spend time on this. I think on the 5th year of BioFarm, most people have got a pretty good idea of the principles of biological farming and the benefits then subsequently. I think again people have a very good idea, and the difference between conservation biological farming and small. In DANÚ we prefer to use the word biological because it's about attention and putting focus on soil biology and plant health, and everything that pertains to that is ultimately a biological function. At the start of the project, and we've been running it the whole way through, we set up 4 plots, a minimum of 1 hectare each and a maximum of 2 hectares. These are field-sized plots with the intention being that we were looking to see field results from what we actually wanted to start out in this transition program. Plot 1 is controlled using the standard Chagas Green Book guide, and then plot 2 is control with buffered nitrogen and buffered acid phosphate. Plot 3 then was full mineral balancing, again with buffered nitrogen and phosphorus. And lastly, the plot 4 was full mineral balancing with selected biological inoculants and treatments. So these were the trials that were set up initially at the start. We then had very extensive baseline data. On the left of the screen you can see we had a very detailed, comprehensive soil test to establish exactly what was going on each of the farms, on the trial plots in each of the farms. We did a Morgan's test, a MLH3 test, and then a total test which gave us an indication of what the actual level of nutrients were available in the parent material of the soil. In the centre sheet there is a soil bioassay. And this was done again for each of the 48 plots across the 12 farms to give us an idea what exactly the soil biology looked like at the start of the project. And lastly then on the right hand side we had some physical measurements on site, like root mass, VES, visual estimation of soil structure, earthworm counts, penetrometer readings, and water infiltration results. And what we found fundamentally was in the soil tests, every single plot had a mineral imbalance, be it with major and minor elements. Some imbalances were large, some of them were not so large, but there wasn't a plot that could be called in optimum balance from a soil biological point of view. Exactly the same with the soil bioassays. Not a single soil across the 12 farms showed that they were in an optimal balance. And again, with the visual evaluation, soil structure, penetrometer readings, worm counts, and water infiltration rates, all of them were suboptimal, particularly water infiltration rates, which is indicative of compaction. At this point, it's essential to make this clear. The DANÚ trials are not scientific trials. They simply couldn't be, because the level of funding that would be needed would run into the millions to cover the number of parameters that would be necessary to monitor and give proper attention to, because it's a more holistic type approach. The plots were used as an attempt to give an idea as to what we should do and start working with amendments, rather than taking the risk out on the main body of the farm that we would attempt to do it in a reasonably structured way, with the farmers leading the process on the individual plots. And I'm just going to quote from the last paragraph from this. This was an excerpt from our original project proposal in 2017. If towards the end of the project the principles and practices learned are applied to all the farmed areas, this will be a key indicator of the project's success. In a sense, it is the performance indicator. The reality 4 years after we've started is that all 12 DANÚ farmers are now applying biological farming principles to all of their farmed lands. 3 DANÚ farmers have now gone organic. which is 25%, and I would imagine one or two more may consider going in that route in the next couple of years, which is a very big uptake, and it's understandable why transitioning to a biological farming certainly lends itself for people to move in that direction. So on the livestock farms, we've seen, and I'm only using just bare figures here, nitrogen in particular, because it's the biggest issue. 35 to a 75% nitrogen reduction with a minimal reduction in output. On the tillage farms, we've got a 15 to 50% with a minimal reduction in output. It's a little trickier on tillage farms because soils are more degraded, although you can see from Norman's work the progress has been made in moving the soils in the right direction. Also, the cultivars that are being used have a very small root mass as a consequence of NPK fertilizing over the breeding of these cultivars, and the root masses for these modern varieties don't lend themselves to be cut back rapidly on nitrogen without a number of generations of home-sown seed to try and break through that cycle. But we're happy to record that insecticides have been reduced by 100%, and we're replacing nutrition instead of using insecticides, and it's working fairly well. Fungicides have been reduced from 30 to 60%. It's a bit of a bogey bear. We need to do more on it, but ultimately it's nutrition. We don't need the fungicides if we address nutrition. And the last one, the herbicides, I wish I could say we were making more progress, but I feel we're not making progress on it. And I don't think anyone in DANÚ is ultimately happy that we still are using herbicides. But there's many, many reasons for it, and we still have to think of a commercial reality of what we're doing. But any herbicides that are being used are being buffered with a fulvic acid. Water is adjusted to pH to minimise the deleterious effect it is having in soil biology. But we can take it as understood without any equivocation. With fungicides and herbicides still in the system, there's a limit as to how far your soil biological health will develop. And that isn't conjecture. We see that as a reality. So we are conscious that we need to move on it. But where nutrition has been used, this is an example. Those four top slides are taken from, or photographs are taken on the same day in a spring bean crop where that crop got nutrition. And the last slide on the bottom is a neighbour's crop which didn't get nutrition. And obviously I'm not going to mention the farms, but a non-DANÚ farm, and you can see it's covered with aphids, and that crop is not in a good position. So we do know that we can address the issue of insect damage very effectively with nutrition if we go in early enough at the right time. So to help us to do that and look at nutrition in general, we are constantly taking sap analysis, samples for sap analysis. That's done with Nova Crop in Holland. It's the only laboratory in Europe that's actually doing it. And this gives us an ability to help anticipate potential problems and respond to them to nutritional imbalances fairly quickly. The one thing we've noticed over a couple of hundred samples at this stage is that we have not been able to get in any single sample all 5 key nutrients at the optimum level for photosynthesis: nitrogen, magnesium, phosphorus, iron, and manganese. We've got 4, we've got 3, and this is limiting photosynthetic efficiency. Our thoughts on needing foliar sprays as part of a transition period is exactly that. Ultimately, if the soil does move to a full level of robustness from a biological point of view, the plant is in a position then to look for all the nutrients it needs at every growth stage on call. But we're a long, long way from that, and we're using these foliar nutritional sprays as a help to move the whole soil biology and the crops, cover crops, and the continuing ongoing soil development over the next number of years. This is just a bean crop. It's actually from Nigel. So you can see how healthy it is. No nitrogen, no fungicides, and it's just perfect. These are just some samples we have here. This is multi-species swards are being sown on all the livestock farms right now, and my expectation is that they'll grow to be a very significant percentage of the grassland farms in DANÚ as time goes on. We're seeing, you can see in plots 3 and 4 here, the significant reduction in chemical N usage without a massive drop in yield, if at all, and again repeated in the second year. The figures are lower for the second year because of the drought, and also the full growing season hasn't been fully accounted for. And it was interesting, an earlier speaker talked about the multi-species swards. We absolutely agree. The architecture For well-developed or well-thought-through cover crops, the architecture for a multi-species sward means that the leaf panelling and leaf area index is definitely increasing the ability to improve photosynthetic efficiency. There's no doubt about that, and we're seeing the effect ultimately in root exudates being able to feed biology a lot more vigorously, and as a result, the soil is developing a lot faster. This is, I'm afraid it's just a bit, on this screen it's a bit missing on the bottom, but this is just a winter or malted barley, spring malted barley for another DANÚ farmer, tillage farmer. But I just want you to pay attention in relation to mindset and attitude. On the top left is actually a picture from last year, and that's groundsel that you see there, the very, very vigorous green coloured crop, which is considered a weed, and oats has been sown into that directly. That groundsel will be killed off by cold weather, and it's just about adopting a different attitude, but it's providing a living cover at the moment, and it's keeping nutrients from being leached away, and as it breaks down then it'll start feeding the crop. So there is a synchronicity going on there between what would be typically considered a weed in a conventional system, and in a biological farming system we're using that weed to advantage. I just mentioned the issue of multi-species swards. These are just details. You can see the calves here on the top right hand side. Fabulous calves, only a few months old, and there's a lot of work putting in managing these trial plots. Sometimes the farmers would wish they were field size, but if we had started with, I mean, talking about 30, 40 acres, possibly in a tillage, or 10, 15 in the grassland system, if we were making mistakes, it's a big cost if it had gone wrong. But they can be a bit fiddly and a bit tedious. This is some of Nigel's work actually here on top, where we're actually weighing and measuring the nutrient density of seeds. That's a wormery there, courtesy of Nigel. He'll elaborate on it a bit more. And I just put this up to show you that we've seen an explosion on the farms in biodiversity. The animal life is just rocketing on the farms, and we're only 4 years in. And again, these slides just demonstrate this very clearly. There's much more action, there's much more engagement, and the farmers are much more engaged as well. And people are happier. It's actually a joy to be farming and seeing that there's a potential to move it in a direction. The key issues we're faced with: soil compaction. It continues to be a major problem, and this is limiting the development of good soil fungal populations, which are definitely missing, and thus reducing humus development potential. And in view of the bigger geopolitical situation that we're now facing, which is massive, we have to start addressing what we can do inside the farm gate a lot more. And we have to put much, much greater emphasis on getting these areas right. And you can see that Norman, and you'll see with Nigel following, that we're already engaged with this. But engaged is not enough at this stage. We need to go a lot further if we're going to survive, and we have to learn to do much, much more inside the farm gate. And I've listed some of the things that we see as being extremely important. And the last one then would be towards the end of the project, a thorough examination of the input costs versus output levels, because ultimately it's net profit per hectare as well, sustainable net profit per hectare as well actually matters. Norman mentioned aerobic composting. This is a DANÚ Farmers aerobic compost that was put together in mid-June, and that was third week of September we looked at that. The beauty of aerobic composting is the carbon capture is 90% plus, whereas in an aerobic compost you'd be lucky to catch 60-65%. It's quite a big carbon loss. And this is done with a homemade lab as a ferment, right, and it's sprayed through it as it's put together. Feedstock that can be used in this situation is anything from sawdust, miscanthus, green material, brown material. There's a wonderful opportunity for us to examine and progress this type of work a little bit further. And because of our concern in relation to this, and thankfully to NOTS, where a number of us went on a compost making course with Bruno Follador, which proved to be very, very instructive, because we need to up our game on this. If we're going to start working on these amendments, and I think Norman hinted at the time issue, and Nigel will hint at the time issue, I'm sure, as well, on practical farming levels, is that this is an absolute essential thing. If we're going to be involved in this, we don't keep making the mistakes that people have made in the past. It's perfectly legitimate to make new mistakes, but learn from others and learn to do it right where the knowledge is actually there. And we also had a number of us on the Korean natural farming course, and that was incredible, extremely intense, but many aspects of that. I would imagine the level of discipline and diligence that's needed to make it work effectively is quite high, but I believe that it will appeal to some people. And I have to commend Tom Stack down in Limerick for hosting it first, and also you can just see on the right hand side there, that's a sward 28 days after putting a liquid indigenous microorganism and a lab out, LEMO. This is robbed from Norman. I think a picture and pictures say 1,000 words, and here's 1,000 words about the beauty of biological farming and all the things that it actually can entail, in that it's bringing both life to the farm, life to the business, and I think a bit more resilience as to how we can manage in the future. And lastly then, and I think Jack Nolan touched on this to some extent. He talked about get out there and do it. One of the things we have in play at the moment is discussion groups in tillage and in grassland systems all over the country. The format's already there. People are accustomed to working with them. And this is a vehicle that we don't need to reinvent the wheel with it. It's just a matter of a mindset change and just getting on with it. Because ultimately, from a DANÚ perspective and from a farmer's perspective, it's farmer empowerment that's going to make the difference, and it's essential to the future of profitable farming in harmony with nature. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. You kept well to time too, because I think these people are getting hungry now too. Great insight there. Nigel, when you're getting set up, I just have a question for David. You mentioned groundsel there, and like that's become a real problem in tillage to control, because it is a yield robber. So one problem with it is, I suppose, we didn't get a really bad frost last winter. So, that's a challenge that we're facing. We don't have the same winters, and even, to kill off some of the cover crops and that kind of thing that we were talking about, that's an issue we're facing, isn't it, in some of these things that we're talking about?
I agree. I don't profess to be an agronomist, but one of the things that we have, or a lot of tillage farmers have done, is gone straight from a ploughing situation into a min-till, no-till. And sometimes we have to ask, is the biology fit enough to do that? And if we want to avoid, and we're doing our very best to minimize the deleterious effect of herbicides, but you have to be practical as well. You have to stay in business. And when they need to be used, they need to be used. But people are becoming more and more uncomfortable in using them because it doesn't fit in. And that's going to lead to more and more effort. Once people become uncomfortable, they will come up with solutions and collectively. And I don't know how soon that will happen, but I did make it quite clear it's the bogey in what we're at, having the herbicides particularly in the system.
Fair enough. And I think in general, farmers, conventional, organic, biological, I think there definitely is a change there. So that's a good thing. Nigel, your presentation's on screen, so we'll let you off.
Okay. Thanks very much, Vaughan. I feel a little bit of a fraud, I'm afraid, because Jerry, Trevor and Norman robbed all my slides, and now the few I had left, David is after ruining. But anyway, look, we'll flick through anyway. Just to start off with, a little bit of my backstory, or as Gabe Brown puts it, my context. In 1996, my wife Kate and I took over and started farming part of the home beef and dairy farm in Grange Con in Wicklow. And we had land, but no stock sheds or machinery, so we borrowed a big lot of money. And Kate was a teacher, so a regular income meant we could make it work financially. And we started building a house ourselves, and we also started to make and erect sheds, literally ourselves. Now, I mean, I did the welding. And during a 10-year stroke 30-year plan, we both worked off-farm jobs and reared 3 great children. And incidentally, the house got finished 3 years ago. So that's sort of my backstory, and now to the farming bit. We were running approximately 60 cattle plus tillage, and it was traditional plough-till sow. Crops were barley and occasionally wheat and oats, but there was no such thing as a rotation. It just literally was fairly wrong, really, when I think of it. But we farmed away for a while and things were okay, but then I started, just something wasn't right. I couldn't really explain it. Every season we went out, soils were getting tired and harder to work, and this was my big problem. Wet weather was really affecting our topsoils. There were just flooding, and even on dry years we were getting an awful flooding. And we were coming up with different weeds and diseases constantly, and more synthetics going out, and that meant more and more money. And I felt I was becoming a moron farmer. And I just was really unhappy. And what really, really upset me was I could see the environment changing around me, and it wasn't for the better. And all through the year 2014 and 15, I'd be hassling my Teagasc advisor for discussion on something different. I wanted something maybe halfway between organic and traditional, where we wouldn't always be chasing yield. Every meeting I went to was yield, yield, yield. And I wanted to try and get something different, and maybe a lower input option, maybe better for the environment, but I had absolutely no idea what that was. So in January 16, I had my first major step on my biological farming journey. Ironically, on a Teagasc Farm discussion group walk, I met Stuart Fitzgerald, who introduced me to Base Ireland, who I just find the most incredible group of farmers, and very diverse. I don't say I love all of them, but they're very diverse. There's large, small, every type of farmer, including biological and organic. And they all have this common goal to try and improve the environment, understand biology, and try and regenerate our soils on our farms. They're outside the box thinkers. And a great motto, farmers educating farmers. So that was the start of it. And then the second step was on 2017, where I did a soils course with David Wallis. I started the course with a few questions in my head. I had these lovely ideas, you know, about lime and one thing and another. And you failed miserably, because I emerged after a few days of the course, my head was fried. And I mean fried. None of the questions in my head were answered, but I had literally hundreds going around. I was just, I don't know, I didn't know where to go. But to me at the time, all this stuff was mind-blowing, because I'd done lots of courses and schools, green certs, farm walks, and nobody once mentioned soil biology. Just nobody mentioned it. And nobody ever brought a spade on a field walk. And I found the whole thing overwhelming again. I really didn't know where to start, but I did know something had to change. So in the same year it was, 17, we had several base meetings fairly close together, and then we had a trip to Groundswell, which I'd recommend to anybody who's starting off on this line. And I bought a second-hand drill from the UK, and I drilled my first crop. On the base group advice, just as Norman said there a minute ago, beans into ley. And this was what I did. So I took their advice and I went into it. It looked very rough. My father wasn't 100% impressed with the look of it. It was a bit messy, but the young crop looked pretty good. And I tell you the truth, I was feeling pretty proud of myself. And the neighbours started looking over the fence, which was a very interesting thing. I was getting all sorts of funny looks when I'd go out. So after Groundswell and David's course, I made one decision: no more insecticides on my farm. And I think that was one of the best decisions I ever made. But just to show you a little quick story of what can happen. This happened. I went out one day to my lovely new bean crop, and this is what I saw. And I really, really got panicked. So I put it up on the base chat, and Johnny Green rang me. He won't mind me quoting his name, he's probably listening now. And he asked me a question: what percentage of the plants are affected? Now I hadn't a clue, so I had to walk back down to the field, and I counted, and yeah, maybe 1 or 2. So his advice was do nothing and look tomorrow and tell me what you see. So I did it, and the next day he gave me the same advice, and the next day. But on the 4th, I was really getting nervous. But then I saw this. So I rang Johnny and I said, there's a few ladybirds. And he said, do nothing, the army has arrived. And 4 days later, all the aphids were gone. And as far as I'm concerned, that's real integrated pest management. It's the way it should be. And Johnny gave me this advice, which I still use today. If you're not sure what to do, 9 times out of 10 I find you're better to do nothing. So I was sowing these lovely heavy cover crops for my drill. I've taken them out because we're stuck for time, but they were causing an awful dragging problem with my tine drill. So I modified it and I put these leading discs on the front to help to prevent the dragging, because it's not a true direct drill like Norman has. It's not perfect, but it's good. And I think that's something we need to do, is just not always try for perfect. And this is just a quick little shot of a summer cover crop this year. Bear in mind it's only there 7 weeks. And maybe Kevin can play that just to show. Oh. Hopefully it's just a little chatter. Have we lost it? No, we've gone on. We lost it. Okay, it doesn't matter, Kevin. That cover crop you saw there was just 7 weeks in the ground, and I was able to manage to get it to that height and drill straight into it. And okay, this is a shot just to give you another, and this is where I'm just repeating what the others were saying. This is actually, if we can get the slide up. Are we stuck, Kevin? Okay, this was a picture taken on my farm last week, and you'll see 2 shovelfuls of clay. The same field, 3 meters apart. Okay, and the left-hand side is a drill miss. It got no cover crop for 2 years, and on the right-hand side is diverse cover crops. If you think of it, the second one is only in the ground a few weeks. I mean, that to me, I don't really need to elaborate on that. Okay, and this was brought up by Elaine earlier, and one of the first discussions. It's lime, and this is a soil sample from a field called the Cottage Field in 2015. And I don't know if you can read it or not, but it says it needs 3.5 tons of lime. That was normal. Every single soil sample I ever took, or my father ever took in our farm, said we needed at least 3 tons of lime. Never saw anything different in all our times farming. And this is from 2019. The same field is on the top with the red arrow there, and it says excess lime, no lime needed. And the other 2 fields below it, the hill field and number 2, both say the same, excess lime, no lime needed. The only difference in those was the method and the way we were working. The difference is cover crops and direct drilling, or minimum disturbance. I hadn't really changed anything else at that stage. So the plants, I feel, sort out the lime problem. And that might be controversial. But anyway, okay, so the next major turn in my biological journey was again due to David Wallis. He rang me and told me he was setting up an EIP trial called DANÚ, and he outlined the trial to me on the phone. He said, look, no money, lots of work and hardship, lots of study, but you will get a lot out of it, and I guarantee you'll learn a lot. And he said, by the way, I need to know tomorrow. And that literally happened. So I became a DANÚ farmer, and I only regret it on very busy harvest days. And to have the backup of David, Robbie and Dave has been incredible. And again, this was said before, farmer empowerment. It actually empowered me. So this is the busy day that I don't like DANÚ, where I have no yield monitor on my combine. It's an old combine, so I have to bag out and weigh samples out of the plots. And then do all this sampling work. It's a right pain in the butt, but you know, it's still. I find it fabulous. And now here's where Norman stole all my stuff again. One of the most important things I have found over the last few years, and the most bang for your buck, is home-saved seed dressing and biological dressing. Home-saved seed saving. Sorry, I'm getting all caught up. And we had many discussions among Base and DANÚ, and I decided to experiment. So I pot trialed home-saved seed versus bought seed. Now, this was done in pots just in my yard. And that's a 10-day pot trial of gangway certified on the top. There's dressed, undressed, and dressed with my own biological mix, which I'll just go through in a minute. And I'm just going to enlarge that a little bit so you can see it. And I think I don't really need to say anything more about it, because the dressed, which is chemically dressed with the red line under it, think of that, that's 10 days old, and look at the difference in those seeds. The root mass is just totally different. They look totally different. And basically, in every trial on my farm so far, pot or field, always gave similar results. Seed was always quicker to germinate, always stronger and healthier than I could buy. And the bought seed always needed more minding and more inputs. And through DANÚ, I've started to learn about epigenetics. And when I think of epigenetics, it makes complete sense of those findings about seed. So this is just a shot of 2020. It's farm saved Infinity on the left, treated with my biological dressing, and on the right is the chemically dressed Infinity. And I think, again, you don't need actually to be a farmer to see the difference there. It's pretty dramatic. And just to demystify this seed dressing, because I have had it said to me that, oh no, it's too complicated. That first picture is a seed wash, which basically involves soaking seed for 24 hours and then using the liquid as part of the seed dressing. Again, I'm missing a trick now. I realize from Norman I should have hens to eat the wet seed, and that's just taking out the vermi, and there's the very expensive filtration system for filtering the mixture. It's a mixture of vermi, seaweed, humic, and seed wash. And this is hopefully again a very expensive piece of equipment. It's my homemade seed dresser, not nearly as posh as Norman's. If possible, I aim to dress 24 hours before sowing. Norman already said why. I normally put about 8 litres per tonne, and we'll see, can he run this one? We haven't bad luck, are we? We're gone again, are we? Nearly there. Okay, there we go. And this was this year's wheat being dressed in my ultra super seed dresser. It's just the liquid flows out into the auger, and it comes out the top dressed at about 8 litres per tonne. It comes out quite wet. It's actually very damp to touch, and it's very damp to touch. So I leave it 24 hours, and that seed will be dry and ready to go through the drill. So, and this has again, Norman stole my thunder. This is just my IBC wormery. Norman told you how to make it, so I won't go through it again. And these are my staff, the unsung heroes of the whole operation. Okay, and this is just a quick shot. This is 20-day-old winter wheat. On the left is from my field, and from the right is from a plough-till sow conventional system. And you'll see from that the leaf is much bigger on the conventional systems. Seed, but have a look at the seed mass. Again, I think that's absolutely dramatic. Okay, and here I am in front of a NOTS conference talking about fertilizer. So you'll have to forgive me, I probably get lynched on the way out. But one of the things we learned through DANÚ and through BASE is that foliar fertilizers are way more effective pound for pound or kilo for kilo than granular. And if they're more effective, the angle I was coming with, that means I should be able to use a lot less. So I made a simple system for melting and dissolving urea for foliar spray, a simple trash pump. I melt half a bag of urea in water, add seaweed and trace elements, etc., pump it into the sprayer, dilute it down so a bag covers 16 hectares, which is quite a lot. And I don't know whether you can run that or not, Kevin. Is it going to run or not? There we go. It's very simple. Just the water circulating out the bottom in the top. That looks very complicated. Thank you. Okay, and this was the result of my winter wheat. I did winter wheat and winter oats, but this was the two results are just pretty well the same. I did 6 runs through the season. 90 kilograms per hectare of total nitrogen used through the season on this wheat crop. There was no organics used because I hadn't got them. And that's the wheat crop. And my nitrogen was reduced by 50%. And now that would still be relatively low. It would be probably a lot more than 50% of conventional thinking. It got one fungicide for mildew because I chickened out. Again, as Norman said, prices were high and look, I was afraid. I actually chickened out. But that reduced my fungicide by 60% on that crop. And the double spray, where I double sprayed, even that tiny amount, it put the crop down. So that shows how effective it was. There was only 10 kilos going out at a time. And the bricks, we were bricks testing all year, and the bricks went up to 25, the highest bricks we had on any of the crops on my farm, even though I was getting the least amount of nitrogen. And the sap tests, we did sap tests throughout the year, and they showed no nitrogen deficiency, which doesn't really add up. And the yield ended up at 3.95 tons per acre at 20% moisture. Now, some conventional guys would be getting quite a bit higher, but if you think it was on 90 kilograms of nitrogen, as far as I'm concerned, that's a real winner, and certainly the margin would be better probably than 5 tons in a conventional system. Now, I appreciate I picked a bad year to try this because there was record grain prices, and it just, look, that's what I did. I also did it on oats, and I got, with 80 kilograms of nitrogen, I ended up with 3.85 tons. So as far as I was concerned, that was a complete success. And I'd just like to just think of one thing. Imagine if we could put that out across the country. And we have several DANÚ members and we have several base members doing it. If we could get that out across the whole system, just think how much nitrogen we would take out of Ireland. It's just worth thinking about. Anyway, these are my DANÚ plots. Just a picture below taken in March 21. It's just showing the different, even though they had the same crops in them, the different look of them, the way they actually look completely different. And this is the top right is a picture taken, the dividing line between plots 2 and plot 3. And it's consider the whole thing was sown with the same cover crop. And look at the difference. The problem was that the chopped straw, I've been chopping straw for the last couple of years on my entire farm, like Norman is talking about, but the chopped straw never broke down on plots 1 and 2, the conventional plots. Everywhere else, the straw is just gone. So it shows that there is some sort of a difference between the biology is much better in the other plots and in the rest of my farm. And if we go on here, we did a simple, if I can get it, a welly walk test. This is a highly complicated test, but you can see there's a huge difference in the plots between the conventional plots and the other ones. And I was part of the department soil sampling project, and I explained to him about the plots and I marked them, so he sampled them separately. And he said to me afterwards, I don't know why, but that last plot, it walks and samples much better. He was able to spot it, even though he knew nothing about them. Now, the unfortunate part was, and I tried last week to get back the results to see was there a difference did he actually find a difference on his tests, but I couldn't get them back in time. So that was a bit of a pity. Okay, right, the whole farm progress in the last 5 years. This is just looking at the whole farm in a whole. It's not just about DANÚ. I used 100% farm-saved seed on the farm, except for DANÚ plots 1 and 2, which David explained have to be conventional, and I hate those plots. No insecticides have been used on the farms, that's minus 100%. Overall nitrogen use on the entire farm is down 40%. Fungicide use on the farm is down 60%. But I will qualify that by saying it's not a high disease year. Herbicide use is down 30%, and this is where, as David alluded to, I struggle with grass weeds. I am finding heavier seed rates help to reduce all the weeds, but grass weeds are a problem. I'm using the dreaded Roundup to terminate the cover crops. It's at a bit less than 2 litres per hectare, and I am using water pH control and Fulvic to reduce those rates as much as I can. But I will not use it on a food crop. So the Roundup is used to terminate the cover crop, but it is not used on the crop that's going to go into the food system. I know that's not perfect, but I just yet haven't found it an alternative, and I'm struggling. I have tried crimper roller and rolling in the frost rolling the frost sort of works. If we could get frosts, but we just haven't had frosts. The winter temperatures are too high, and I'm still struggling with this. So back to the wildlife. I'm seeing an absolute explosion of wildlife on my farm. It's just exploding, particularly insect life and bird life. And I'm seeing all sorts of birds, from curlew, plover, lapwing, sparrowhawks, kestrel, buzzards, and right up to this. This is a terrible photograph, but it was taken by a neighbour, and it's 3 owls on a tree on my farm together. So I am seeing a huge improvement in bird life, and the skylarks, the lapwing were all over my crops. But there is a narrative creeping in out there that cover crops are bad for birds, particularly lapwing. And this is possibly true for covers that are intensively grown and intensively grazed, but we in Basin DANÚ are not seeing this reduction. In fact, we're seeing the opposite, and it's very important that this is put out there. And I'm going to ask the people who are in power and who are involved with this, please come to our farms to do some bird counts, because we are not seeing this reduction that's supposed to be there. And there's talk of forcing farmers to leave stubble bare over winter. And Gabe Brown told us the other day that biology collapses in 28 days without roots. So policy, even well-meaning policy, can have very bad effects. And I'm going to go back to my spade here, my 2 pictures. Bear in mind, the one on the left had no cover crop for 2 years. Compaction. Did you know that 1 inch of rain is 113 tons per acre? And it hits the ground at 30 kilometers an hour. And I'm just going to say, please don't make me leave my soil without its armour. Okay. Right, it's been said to me several times in the last year that our trials are not scientific and they won't stand up. But I've changed 100% of my farm to similar biological methods. It's not prescriptive, but DANÚ trials stand up to farmer review. They may not stand up to scientific review or peer review, but they stand up to farmer review. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And the one thing I've learned is it empowers you. Start thinking like this empowers you. And I have a suggestion, which has already been taken again by the first speaker today, on-farm trials would link up to researchers, university, Teagasc, Notts. Farmers must be front and centre of that research, not just as second-class citizens. And for me, every day is a school day. Basin DANÚ, I've been challenged to observe and to question. And I've been told by an agri-sales guy recently that I'm turning into one of the hardest people to sell stuff to, which I regard as a really nice compliment. I love the neighbours looking over the fence and saying, what the hell is he doing now? And anything that looks bad in a field, I just give it a white stake, and I've lots of them. And Kate says our whole farm is now a blooming experiment. So where do I go from here on my farm? I'm going to try and figure out how to combine the best elements of conventional and organic farming systems. How do we increase fungal populations? Combi crops are permanent understories. The KNF, Jerry Gillespie, I'm not exactly sure, although after yesterday I'm making a Johnson Sewer bioreactor. I've just decided that and I booked my place on the course. I'm really not sure where I'm going, but I'm enjoying my farming. I'm enjoying my freedom to farm in this biological system. I'm enjoying the learning journey and the great people I'm learning with. DANÚ, BASE, and I really must compliment Notts for their open-minded approach to this, because they've stepped really outside the box. And I look forward to meeting all of you afterwards at the bar for some more learning. And thank you very much indeed for listening.
Thanks, Nigel and David. We'll take a few questions, and then Tommy is going to come up on stage. Okay, so we've a few in already from online. Stick up your hands if you have some. On your slides, this is for yourself, David. You showed nitrogen going out onto multi-species on the dairy farm. Was this necessary for yield milk production? So Kenny,
Kenny, was it?
Yeah.
It was Kenny's slides.
Debatable. keep in mind that Kenny's not organic, and we're in transition, and there would be the issue of ensuring that there's enough fodder or forage produced at a stocking rate that would be significantly higher than in an organic system. I take the point. I think it could have been done without, but actually the figures on that sheet were referring to the 4 plots. I probably confused it a bit by putting up photos of multi-species swards. They were grass clover plots with a very small amount of clover on them, plots 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's where those nitrogen levels were related to. But there would have been a certain amount of foliar buffered nitrogen out on the multi-species swards.
Yeah, the start of the year, I suppose, in particular.
Yeah, but it would have been buffered.
Yeah. Sean, you have a question there?
Yeah, Nigel, just with the lime there, when you saw the change from 215 to 219, did you put out lime on it, or what rate did you put it out?
Between the two, 15 and 19, is that right? Sorry.
You said it was in excess in 19, wasn't it?
Yeah, I would have put out about 1.5 tons. I never went more than 1.5 tons per hectare. So it would have, in 2015, when I got back that result, I would have put out 1.5 tons, but that's all. And at the moment, I'm really putting out very little lime. I am putting out a bag of Gran Lime on every crop right across the farm, whether it has excess nitrogen or excess lime or not, but I'm doing that for the calcium rather than for the lime. And I don't know, I have a full set of soil samples gone in. Maybe I'll get a shock when I get them back, I'm not sure.
Nigel, while we have you there, there's a question. How long was left between the applications with foliar nitrogen and the wheat?
Okay, I started when I reckoned I had enough leaf to take in the foliar, and I tried to go about every week to 10 days, but this year was quite difficult in getting enough spray days, and I would have liked another pass through closer to the crop ripening, because and it proved right, because the protein was a little bit low in the wheat. I had a good yield, but the protein was a little bit low when I analysed the protein. Having said that, it's feed wheat, and I wasn't getting paid on protein.
Okay.
So it ended up at about 10 days between each application.
Okay. Yeah. Dave, is 5 years long enough for an EIP, or do you need longer to get the full potential? How long are you into DANÚ now, did you say?
4 years, and we'll be finished. We actually have 5.5 years, and I have to say the Department of Agriculture, with these EIPs, the fact that they've given us 5.5 years and taken the risk to let us loose with a few bob to go out in this has been a hugely positive development, because normally projects generally get clipped for being too short. But from a transition point of view, and I don't know,
no, it's not long enough.
I think the transition is open. The transition is open-ended. I think we're looking 10, 15 years. To be fair.
So there is opportunity there to extend it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Anyone else with a question in the audience? Sean?
I have a question, guys. When you were doing the EIP, because Nigel mentioned there a lot about what the biodiversity and the wildlife that is appearing on the farm, was this part of the original plan, or is this a total side effect?
No, it was in the original proposal as one of the expectations it was forecast that we would see a considerable increase in biodiversity if we moved in this direction.
But did you have to do like bird boxes or any of that?
No.
It is all about soil health.
No. As I said, the beauty of the EIPs, and there's 57 of them, I think, in the go right now, is the freedom. There's a risk being taken with farmers doing this, but that's given farmers the freedom to think on their feet, to do what needs to be done. And really, I mean, we can't but be grateful that it's actually government supported to run with this, because I mean, I don't think only somebody who's completely short-sighted would not see that across not just our project, the benefits that are accruing from the EIPs as to which direction we should go for the most efficient return on money being spent on this type of work.
Okay.
I think.
Thanks very much, guys. So Tommy Hughes is going to be up in a few minutes. We're going to take a break, but we'll give the lads a round of applause.